Hi, my name's Steve and welcome to the Trial Bike Tour YouTube channel. I'm here representing my walking partner on the Camino de Santiago, Kirby. The two of us are geologists that are approaching our 70th birthdays, and hence the tour has been called the Trial Bike Tour Two Fossils Walking. We've done a lot of research and a lot of training, and out of that work we've come up with some interesting observations about packs and shoes that maybe are a little different than what else you'll see online. So we thought, let's put together a couple videos and sort of see what people think about what our experience was. Let me give you a little description of the humans, because I think it's actually really important to this story. So I'm about 6'2", and I'm 240 pounds. My inseam is 32 inches, and my arms are about 35 inches. So my arms are longer than my legs. All my friends in the 376 Screamers, you can insert your best primate joke here. Kirby, on the other hand, is almost 6'3". He's about 180 pounds. And he has 34-inch inseam and 32-inch arms, so the opposite. And if you look at us, it's really clear. My waist is much lower, and therefore I have a much longer body than he does. My torso is much longer. I think when you see the conclusions of what came out of our work, that's going to be one of the key elements of what made the difference. So, we looked at a lot of different backpacks. We tried on lots in various stores like Mech. At the end of the day, we selected two. One was my backpack, which is this one here, which is the Osprey Atmos 65 AG. And Kirby's ended up being the Osprey Unlimited 32 liter. So his pack is roughly half the size of mine in terms of nameplate liter size as listed on the website. And Shannon's going to put up a little example of Kirby's pack, and we'll talk a bit about mine here in a minute. Well, I've personally tested this backpack well over 500 kilometers now, and I did probably 100 to 200 kilometers with the Unlimited before I made my selection, and Kirby's put in plenty on his as well. So it comes with a fairly large database of trial and error here to see where we ended up. So let me talk to you a bit about this particular 65 AG. So I've heavily modified this pack. At the end of the day, what I wanted to do, you really couldn't do with the pack as it was originally designed, so I made a whole bunch of changes. And so I'm going to talk you through those. The first thing I did was, these packs all come with a brain. I got rid of the brain. It's just a lot of zippers and cloth for another 10 liters of room. So that takes this 65 down to, let's call it, maybe 55 liters. It used to be you could get this pack with a flap that came over the top, but they stopped making it for some reason. So I basically manufactured my own and built a rain cover that goes over the top. It still has a proper rain cover that goes on from the bottom that's attached, and that's all fine. But that was sort of the major change that occurred. What I really liked about this backpack was the suspension system. Okay, so let's talk a bit about the suspension system. The first thing you'll notice on a 65 is just how long the backpack is. This is probably why I like it. It's very long, like my torso, so it has a good fit for me just because of the length of the pack. The second thing you'll notice is that there's a ton of airspace on this thing, so more than you'll see on, I think, almost any other pack. That for me is a really, really strong characteristic. The third thing about it, the mesh material is covered with a sticky substance that allows it to sort of adhere to your shirt or to your jacket. For me, that actually stabilized the pack a lot and makes it very, very comfortable when I'm walking long distances. Easy to see that the hip belt on this pack is absolutely massive. It's very rigid, and that is one of the things that really works for me. When I cinch this thing down on my hips, I get 75 or 80% of the weight easily distributed on my hips, and that's a very big piece of the puzzle. Well, let's talk a bit about load adjusters. So for me, load adjusters on a pack are maybe the most important feature. The ability to move that pack on and off your back and adjust the weight. I probably do it once an hour, but there's a problem with trying to do that. So as every good Canadian kid knows, just try moving a zipper or something with a strap and you got gloves or mitts on. It's just about impossible. Well, the solution, if you're a Canadian kid, is to put a toggle on it, which is these things. And so by putting these on, I have the ability to pull on and release the load adjusters every hour without taking my gloves off and getting all organized and doing it again. It turned out that actually work really well on the side pockets. These side pocket zippers aren't very good on this particular pack, but when you have a toggle on it, you can reach around with your left hand and grab it and close it while you hold the zipper with your right. So you don't have to take off your mitts, you don't have to, reorganize yourself or stop. Much, much easier to operate. So that's another innovation that I built into this thing that has worked out fantastic for me personally. So that's basically the structure of it. If you look on the back of a 65, there are other things that are kind of interesting. It has the usual expandable thing in the back. I'm never going to use that, and I'll explain why in a minute. It has a side pocket that you can get into that is right here where you can put things in. That actually ends up being part of the backpack. Your sleeping bag or your sleeping gear goes in below in a separate compartment. And I think that's a really important feature of it. And I'll explain to you in a minute why that's so. And then it has the all-important load shift or compression straps on the side. You see here they wrap around and they're quite extensive. That's another feature that's really, really important. So, how do you take a 65-liter pack and make it perform like a 32-liter like the ones Kirby uses? Well, for me, the trick to that is not in the pack you select, but it's how you fill it up. So, if you take a typical small pack and your plan is to buy it small and cram it as full as you possibly can with gear, what will happen every time is that you will basically push out the back of that pack. You'll actually add volume into the pack by filling up to its maximum possible internal size. That works in terms of getting material into the pack, but it actually makes for a very, very different distribution pattern. So I'm now going to sort of move to this whiteboard here and just give a couple seconds on what I'm talking about here. Okay, so I'm going to get all high school science class on you now, but I think it's actually important. I think it explains something that isn't really, you don't see online very much. So most of the things I've seen on backpacks have talked about weight and volume. It's about how many pounds you're going to put in the backpack, or it's about how many liters within the backpack. Well, I think actually the more important characteristic is the depth of the backpack. It's how far that backpack stretches away from your spine. Because the further you get from your spine, the further you're moving the weight of the backpack away from what's known as your center of gravity, which is basically under the frame of your body. And the more you're out there, the worse it's going to feel. I'm going to do a little demonstration here. I'm going to use my hiking pole as a prop, and I'm going to use my wrist as a strain gauge. So let's take a 5-pound weight and stick it on there. And put it right close to my hand. You can hold that up. It's not particularly uncomfortable. You can stand there and hold it for a long time and there's no real effect. But just move it out even, it's called 4 inches. And immediately you'll feel that's much more stressful on your hand. Move it out another couple of inches and you can feel it's even more. And go out, say, to the 11 or 12 inches of a typical backpack and you'll feel just how much strain is there. Now, imagine what happens if you throw a set of shoes on the back of that or your lunch. You're now talking about a lot more weight. And we're not talking 5-pound weight. We're talking a 15 or 20-pound backpack. And we're not talking 3 or 4 minutes. We're talking 8 hours of walking. And you can imagine over the course of a Camino how much more stress that depth is creating on your back. So I believe that's the real challenge in picking a backpack, is making sure that the depth that you're buying is not increased by virtue of making the pack too small. That you have enough height in the backpack to be able to spread that weight out over the whole length of your torso. Okay, so we've decided now that the depth of the backpack is really important, and we have to make sure we buy something long enough that we can actually distribute that weight vertically close to our spine to get the best distribution of weight. Perhaps a bit of a counterintuitive idea if what you're really focused on is just the volume within the backpack. I, for one, believe that if you buy a 24-liter backpack and you hang lots of stuff on the outside, you're probably feeling more weight than if you bought a slightly larger one but got the stuff inside and you're able to use your compression straps to get it closer into the backpack. We're going to demonstrate that a bit here with my backpack. So let's talk about what goes in my pack and how I'm going to pack it. I'm not going to go through every little thing in my backpack. It's basically the same as everybody else. We're walking a winter Camino, which means we've got to go through probably some snowy days, probably at altitude. So I'm taking a lot of warm weather gear, including this, which by the way doubles as my sleeping bag. It's what keeps me warm at night, because I've just got really a light one of those Camino bags from Mech. It doesn't have any real heat capability within it. So for me, I basically carry a series of items that are about 6 to 8 inches in diameter that I can stack vertically along my back. I'm going to demonstrate again from these diagrams what I'm talking about. If you really take a top-loading backpack and you cram everything into it, you're basically going to create this effect. You're going to squish everything down. It's not going to have very much height, but you're going to push it out, creating that center of gravity problem. I believe you should stack things, not pack things. So you stack a series loosely of say 5-liter dry sacks in your bag, and then you allow the compression straps to keep everything more tightly spaced within that. So what you can see here is I've got 1, 2, 3 bags. I've got my cold weather gear. I use a Z-Pack external bag for shipping my backpack, and I put that on the inside and fill that up as I'm filling the pack. I'm going to put everything in the bag now and show you what that does and how I use it going forward. Okay, so this is the full load on my back with all the belts done up. And I think if you look at it sideways, you'll see that there's very little weight that is a long way from my back. I will do everything to make sure that as much of it is against my backbone as I possibly can. This allows me to do it. One of the other things I built into this backpack that really works for me the load adjusters are super important. I mean, I adjust them every hour just because it helps affect how tired my shoulders get by going back and forth on the weights. But if you try and adjust these things with a pair of gloves on, it's really hard to grab the strap. So I put toggles on mine like this, so you can basically just grab these things and pull on them. And it tightens them up. When you want to go the other way, you just follow the cord back up, stick a thumbnail under it, you pop them. And the same gets true of these little side pockets. Try and grab the side, they open up fine, but try and close them. You're going to find it doesn't really work. However, if you can grab it with your other hand, it's no problem. I'm going to show you a couple other what I think are interesting things about the pack. Let's start with weight. In terms of weight, with everything on board, I've taken off my jacket. It's in there too. It's probably the heaviest thing I carry. If I take this and weigh it, all right. So I weigh the pack now with everything on board, 17 pounds. I'm 240 pounds when I started training, 245 pounds when I started training. So I'm way under the 10%. I've got everything on board that people typically put in when they're counting the weight. The other thing I would sort of show you is on this particular model of backpack. A lot of people complain about with top loaders you can't get into the side. Well, this actually has side access. If you're not using an internal waterproof bag, you can get into it on the side. And on the other side of the backpack, there's another packet here. That's where my lunch goes. And again, because it's tucked into the side of the backpack, it no longer has additional weight away from my center of gravity. It's being tucked into the frame of the pack, which I think is better than putting it out here. All right. Last thing I was going to talk about is water supplies. So I really like tubes. I like the system with a bladder. I hate trying to clean a bladder, and so I came across these online, which is basically just a cap and a hose that you attach to any Nalgene bottle. It comes with a separate attachment, so you can screw it right onto the top of just a standard, water bottle that you buy in a store. So for me, this is the right combination. It goes right on the hip down here. So again, not affecting my center of gravity. It's right close to my body. A bladder, interestingly enough, although it's along your back, hard to clean, and to me, actually is putting a little bit more weight up above your waist, which I think adds a little bit of angular momentum and more stress on your back than it would down on your hip. So for me, that's the better combination. Now let's talk about reality. The reality is, I'm going to carry more stuff than this. So I have room in this backpack. If I came across, another Peregrinos struggling with their load, I've got room in here to put probably 10 liters of additional material in my backpack to help them out. I also intend to film all the way along it, so I'm taking along an Insta360 and a 3-meter pole. So that's going to add another pound to the weight. So I'm now up around about 18.5 pounds total weight in the backpack. And when you add water and food, I'm actually literally going to be carrying about 20 pounds. So I've trained all winter, again, over 500 kilometers in some pretty nasty conditions because I'm living up on the Great Lakes. And I'm finding absolutely no body issues with carrying this pack with that weight for that distance. Kirby has had a very similar positive experience, but by adjusting where he carried the weight on his back and using the shorter frame, which is again a bit, counterintuitive, he's getting the same effect with his shorter body frame. And so here's a great example of two different people, two different outcomes with, or the same outcome with two different approaches. Hope this has been helpful. Love to hear comments or questions online on the channel, and love to hear from you if you see anything that you think I should be doing differently from what I'm doing today.
Professor Steve has waxed on very successfully about his theories on his packing his pack and how you want to keep the weight, what pack worked for him. And I found something different that worked for me, and Steve alluded to it, the Osprey Unlimited. This hoisted up here, it's got my stuff in it. So there it is. And it weighs at this point in time 15 pounds. And I got just a few things more to put into it, my toothbrush and toothpaste. But other than that, I'm ready to go. Now, the difference I found with the two packs, the 65 liter that Steve has, I tried, but I found it too long on my body. And as I loaded it up with weights at the MEC here in Calgary and walked around the store with it, as I walked and I'm shifting back and forth with my stride, the pack stayed rigid and upright. And I found it a little unbalancing for whatever reason. And then I switched to the one I have here, and it just felt that much better on my back. And that's the reason I went with the smaller 32 to 34 liter pack, whereas your dad has gone with the bigger one that I think he's modified to some 50, 55 liters. So it was just, I think, the difference in the body types, and he alludes to that in what he recorded.
So maybe just a quick summary of this video and the key points I'm trying to make. Really, there's two. The first one, 8 is great. If you can keep the width of your backpack down at 8 inches or less, you're not going to feel that torque from having a big fat pack that stands a long way from your center of gravity. 2, stack them, don't pack them. Use a vertical stacking of the weight in your pack, and if you have to buy a little bit taller pack to do it, that's better than having a fat pack that stays a long way from your back. And if I was going to add a third one, which we didn't really talk about in the video, but I think it's important, it's all about gross vehicle weight, not net. In other words, I started training, I was 245 pounds, and I'm going to hit the trail at about 230. So I've taken off about the weight of the pack. And so my skeletal muscular system is really not going to be hauling any more weight than I was normally on a day-to-day basis. And so I think if you can adjust a little bit, just get a little bit lighter, you're going to make your body appreciate it and be much less affected by the weight you're carrying. That's it. Thanks a lot. Buen Camino.